describes what she's going to be doing overall.
Outline?
Outline is one word for it, but I heard the other one, which I like.
Roadmap.
Yeah. This right here is a roadmap. Now, the good things about this is that she's given me some idea of how the paper is going to proceed. The bad side, in which why this is not a perfect paper, is do you know exactly what to expect here? Read this over. What is the one issue with this? Or what is one issue with it?
I mean, like, the thesis isn't as clear.
So one thing is the thesis does not leap off the page to quite the same degree. The thesis down here is the last sentence in the paragraph. It is, throughout this I will discuss why I believe that Tommy is correct and why I believe I should shoot him. So she has a thesis, but it doesn't leap out in like a single sentence. It's part of another clause. And this one, the one thing I will say, it's very, very vague. Like, this gives her some idea, but until you go down farther, you don't know that she's going to be, how exactly the paper is going to proceed. So it's more useful. Now, this is not wrong. I will never take off for roadmaps as long as the rest of the paper is clear. But if you're going to include a roadmap, it can be helpful to literally say, like, in this paper, I will argue, state the thesis up here at the top. And then you say, to prove this point, I will first show why someone who says this is wrong, and then I will show why someone who says this is wrong. Now, just brainstorming. Why is it useful to have a roadmap? What is it about that can be helpful?
It's very similar to outline, in my opinion.
And remember, who's reading your paper? Yeah, the concussed fourth grader. And you know what's going to help the concussed fourth grader remember? If they know where it's going before it begins. So if you tell this person, here's what you should expect first, here's what you should expect second, and here's how it'll prove my point, it'll be easier for me who's reading it, because let me tell you, teaching 3 sections, all of the papers come in at once, there are long days of grading. At some point, my brain capacity reaches that of a concussed 3rd grader. Like, I get below that, like, aim of the 4th grader. At that point, oh, my voice just cracked. See? When that happens, the easier you make it for me to follow along, the better it is. So that is why I say, like, my brain, if it can follow when it's like 47 papers in that day, it's going to be much easier. The number one way I can tell how good a paper is going to be, like the number one correlation, is how many times do I have to go back and reread something. If I can make it from front to back in one read-through, you're almost certainly in the A range. If I have to keep going back and reminding myself, you're down a little bit farther, because the goal is to lay out your argument or your reasoning in as clear and simple and easy to follow a way as possible. So in this way, why is it that you want to include this roadmap? Well, because if at any point in the paper, nobody's perfect. We all say things which are a little unclear and a little vague. But when you have 2 possible explanations or 2 possible readings of something, if the person knows what point you're trying to make, it will be easier for them to follow along with. So if I tell you that we're talking about money and that we're going to the bank, you know I'm going to Citibank. If I say we're going fishing and we're going to the bank, the context that I tell you we're talking about fishing will let you know we're going to the Hudson, like the side of the Hudson River. That sort of thing can be very helpful. So in this way, just including a roadmap at the start is very useful for allowing me to be able to follow along, because my memory by paper 47 in one day is not working at its best. So everything you can do to help me, and basically just think of it as, if you can make your point to this concussed 3rd grader or your teacher who has been reading 47 papers, you clearly understand it. And this is a way of, like, how many of you have had something where you thought you understood it and then you tried to explain it to someone else and it became very clear very quickly that you didn't understand it as well as you thought? Yeah, and so in the same way, like, if you can explain it to me in those terms, you understand it, and that's how you will get a good grade. All right. So here's the thesis itself, which could have been even clearer. All right. So then we jump in here. This is that paragraph I talked about where it's filling in the necessary details. So this is the equivalent of the paragraph of in your version of the MTI, where you say what the MTA is and what eye-scanning are. This is the version in which you, in the Wayne Enterprises, describe, I don't know, whatever it is you want to describe. This is the one where in the North Korea hacking of Google, you describe why this, like, what exactly happened in a little more detail, how hacking works, blah, 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 something like that. So always, it's good to include any necessary general descriptions early on in the paper. Why? Why is it good to describe your definitions early? Yes, you don't have to bring them up later, and also, if you're going to be talking about something, it's much more efficient to bring it up first and then describe. If I try to explain to you, like, imagine I went into incredible detail on the Rugby World Cup, and I talked about all the tries that the New Zealand team are scoring, and how they, I know that they destroyed somebody, like, and I'm describing all of this. What is one major question you might have right off the bat? What the hell is a try? If I tell you at the beginning, a try in rugby is the version of a touchdown, it's the same as that's how you get 5 points, and then if you make the extra points, you get 2. Now it's going to make a lot more sense of, like, why the fact that I'm talking about them scoring all these tries matters. Or if I start describing, like, you know, if I start describing to you the importance of, like, the peace thing that was signed yesterday between Pence and Erdogan, what's a question that might come up very quickly? Who the hell is Erdogan? If I tell you, let's first talk about the fact that the head of Turkey, Erdogan, I think is his name? Erdogan, yeah, I can't pronounce Turkish names. My Turkish pronunciation is awful. Erdogan, yeah, you are correct. I had forgotten about my terrible Turkish pronunciation. Thank you. Erdogan's, if I describe to you who he is and what's been happening in Syria in the past week, it's going to be a lot easier for you to understand what happened. So that's the general idea, is if you're assuming your audience is dumb, you got to explain everything you're going to be drawing upon later. Now, there is an art to this, where certain types of things you might want to save till later. So you don't want to just lay out all the definitions at the start. So if, for instance, in this paper, you are then going to talk about, actually, no, let's just talk about the actual MTI one. If you're going to talk about something like, in paragraph 3, you're going to talk about data mining, then you're, definitely going to want to say what data mining is, but you, depending on how your paper's going, might want to save it until you're talking about it in detail. You don't necessarily have to say off the bat, like, what data mining is. You want to lay out everything you need where you best need it. And this is where it's hard, because the answer to where it's best needed is something you have to decide based on what you imagine will be the clearest way of presenting it. And this is where the devil's in the detail. There's not a correct answer about when or where, and that's just the way the world is. The world is gray, there are complications, there are many ways of accomplishing things. But the more you can put yourself in the shoes of somebody else, and the best way of doing this is just to ask yourself, like, if I say this here, go back and read it and be like, what will a concussed 4th grader think at this point? Will this person have any idea what I'm talking about? Will somebody who's never sat in a cyber ethics class know what data mining is? If not, then I should probably say what data mining is right here.
You were right.
What?
It's Erdogan, but like...
Yeah, but I think the Turkish pronunciations are very different.
Is that, because I like kind of swear like a million times.
I'm pretty sure you're actually correct on the pronunciation, but it's spelled with a G. Okay. But I'm almost certain that a G in Turkish is pronounced like a W sound.
I'm about to find out.
Yeah, I'm almost certain you're right. And this is the fun thing about it. I could go, if anyone wants to go down a rabbit hole sometime and just be bored out of their mind, I can talk about, like, different linguistic pronunciations of different letters and the way that the human mind of different people, like, literally cannot hear the sounds that other people are making. And I will go down a rabbit hole that will put you all to sleep, like, so quickly. So if you ever need a nap, just let me know and I'll get out.
Sorry, this is so irrelevant. I'm so sorry, but like,
no, don't apologize.
We're both right, because like, you're pronouncing it like phonetically, but like, it's pronounced Erdogan.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, you, yeah.
Sorry.
Alright, so, now, so right here, this is her version of laying out the things she needs for the paper. So she starts off with just defining act utilitarianism. So in your paper, if you're talking about, and the hardest ones to remember are big picture terms, which seem like you understand intuitively. So terms which you think, I don't necessarily need to define this, But the fact is, there's a lot of subtle complications. So, things like privacy, or responsibility, or causing, or things like this where you have to ask yourself, do I think I need to include this? Because if you say, like, the reason that this is wrong is because it violates privacy, you need to make damn well sure that a fourth grader would know what the hell you're talking about. And because privacy gets used in so many different ways, it's very useful to define your terms. So that's one thing I'll be saying over and over and over again in writing, is like, make sure to define your terms. No?
And also in this case, the consequences.
Yeah, so exactly. So in this one, in this sort of case, you have to define, like, act utilitarianism is the one that has the best consequences. So one thing you might want to do is include a definition of consequences. And again, this is why I say no paper is ever perfect. Blah, 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 blah. So, now, at this point,
Some people think of consequences as being like negative.
exactly, yeah, and so anything that can be misinterpreted, like consequences, or privacy, or anything that you can fill in, or, like, even things like war, or something like that. And anything where you think you might be misunderstood, it doesn't hurt to just include a sentence like, by this, I mean this. And because, yeah. Okay, now she does not have my favorite sort of thing right here, but she kind of does. In that it's rather easy to tell that she's changing topics at this point. Why is it easy to tell she's changing topics? Yeah, she starts by counter-argument, like clearly the topic's changed, but helping you along, there's this lovely friend, the tab key. Change paragraphs at points in which it will help your audience realize you're changing. But if you want to make it even clearer, we can edit her paper and add in a, what was that word I said I will be writing all the time? Signpost. And what is a signpost we say? What does it say? A signpost is something which says where you are in the paper. So if we were to add a signpost in here, it would be something along the lines of, well, does anyone want to take a stab at it? Otherwise, I can just crank one out. Yeah, so this is what I'm looking for with a signpost. The goal of a signpost is to make it easier for you, or for me, the reader, or me, the concussed fourth grader, to know what's happening in the paper. So it would just be something along the lines of, now that we know what act utilitarianism is, let's consider why Tommy is right and he should be shot. That right there is what I mean by a signpost. It tells me what is about to happen in the paper and why we're doing it at this point. And so that's all it is. So in your paper in which, like, if you're talking about MTA, it would just be something like, now that we know what MTA is and how this new system works, we can assess whether it's a good idea. Or, now that we've done this, we can consider the first reason why it's not a good idea, which is. Or, we can see the first reason why it's a good idea, which is. Just something like that will make it much easier for me to remember. Because also, if you include a roadmap at the beginning, it's very helpful to know where it's going to go. But what's the problem with a roadmap? Why is it not a perfect way to know exactly how the paper is going to go? If I get to page 4, and I've read 47 papers, am I going to remember your roadmap? I might remember the general gist, but I might forget some of the details. So what's useful? To remind me of what was there before. Because human beings have fallible memories. We forget things, especially when we're tired and looking at a lot of papers. So, if you've described up above what you're going to be doing, and now you're about to do something, tell me what you're about to do and why you're about to do it. It just helps the paper flow more. Also, don't be afraid of words like therefore, or next, or I'm now going to.
Transition words.
Transition words are very helpful. All right, so that's generally what I'm talking about here. Now, within the body paragraphs themselves, I'm going to highlight a couple things which are useful. So, in the process of defining your terms, where is this? Here we go. Why am I highlighting these words? What? What did I just highlight? Come on, you're literate. Can you all see it? For example, why am I highlighting for example? Remember when I said once you have a reason, you need to expand on it and explain it so that anyone can understand it? Well, one of the best ways of doing that is to provide examples and explain why the example shows what you want it to show. So for instance, if I'm explaining to you why, let's say, why was the Notorious B.I.G. one of the greatest hip-hop artists of all time? And one of my arguments is, his lyrics were genius and incredible, and the poetic rhythm is amazing. And then I say, for example, look at this sentence, and then I include a sentence from his lyrics, and then I say, look at the, like, if you assess this sentence, you will see that, and then I explain why that big lyric is so good. Or I say something like, an overrated musical artist is, I don't know, and I give you an example of a hip-hop artist who doesn't have an incredibly large, interesting vocabulary. And I say, if you read this song, he rhymes the word man with itself 7 times. That is not creative. And to be clear, I'm not talking about Biggie here. I'm talking about some imaginary hip-hop artist. So that's what I'm talking about. So if you make a point, or like I say something like, one of the reasons that one of the reasons that Post Malone is not as good of an artist as Biggie was that like he has a much smaller vocabulary in his most famous songs. For instance, in his song Yada Ya, he uses 200 words, and while comparison Big Papa uses 2,000 or something like that. I don't know, but that's the sort of things I'm talking about. You can use examples to illustrate your points, because if you say something vague like, the United States is a danger to the world, that doesn't really mean anything unless you give examples. Then you could say like, they do this, 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 and this. And so concrete examples are helpful, and the more concrete the better. They can be real, they can be imaginary, like you could say something along this lines of, imagine that Tommy's a beloved public figure or in the process of preventing genocide. That's just to explain, to expand on the points. So one of the best ways of really showing you understand something is to show that you can come up with, or you can identify your own example that demonstrates that point. Does everyone understand that? Also, quotations. Good, but not necessary. However, if you include a quote, never just include a quote. Always put it into your own words right afterwards. You are trying to show me you know how to construct an argument, and you know what the author's talking about. Showing me you know how to hit Control-C, Control-V, and put quotation marks doesn't show me that. What does show me that is your ability to explain what that quote is and why it matters. That's what I'm looking for. So if you can pick out a really good quote and integrate it in well, that shows me you really know what you're talking about. And so that's what you're looking to do with quotations. Always be happy to use them. I will never take off for using them. However, if you include them, make sure you explain them. What I don't want is for you to have a paragraph that says, to prove my point, here's a passage from so-and-so. And then you just have a paragraph from somebody else. And then you say, that proves my point. It's like, no, that proves that you have a thumb and a forefinger on your left hand. So that's another thing worth highlighting. So, let's see, what other things do I want to have? Does anyone have any physical business questions or logistics questions or paper writing questions at this point? So, the paper is due when?
November.
Which is how many weeks from today? Is it 3 or 2? I can't do math. 3 weeks. Oh, that's lovely. That's a lot of time. So your papers are due in 3 weeks from today. So that is November, what did we say, 9th? 8th. November 6th is, actually no, let's go with November 5th. The word 5th is a terrible word. It's very hard to say. November 5th, that is a Tuesday. That night at 11:59 p.m. is the last time in which I will accept any sort of first paper draft for comments. If, however, you send me anything whatsoever before that point, I will give you comments on it. It can be an entire draft, it can be a paragraph, it can be a word, it can be a sentence, it can be a concern. You send it to me, I will respond. If at any point up until that day you want to meet, at the end of that day, you want to meet with me in person and talk about it for however long you want, at any time you want, email me, we will find a time. I'm here every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and I will come in on other days. Very often I just come in and work in the library because I work better at the library than in a coffee shop where I just drink too much coffee and end up shaking in a corner. So, if you want to meet, I am happy. And also my policy is, if on any day up until that point, you tell me I can meet, only I can't meet till 8 p.m., I will be here until the last person needs to meet with me. I will not leave. You all have not had a chance to meet with me, and this matters. I want you all to write a paper you're happy with. If at any point also, if it's the night before a paper is due, and you haven't started it because you're a busy person, and you're terrified because you have no ideas, and you've hit writer's block, what should you do? Email me and we will work something out. If you contact me afterwards asking for an extension, there's less I can do for you, and I'm going to have to take off points. If you meet with me beforehand, I can be lenient and we will work something out. You have 3 weeks though, and you've already had to think about your thesis, so we're already in good shape. Also, citations, for those of you who weren't here last time. I don't give a damn as long as there's a URL or something. 2 reasons. 1, if the plagiarism police come. 2, if you found an outside source that's interesting, I'm probably going to want to read it independently because I find this stuff interesting. And so if I can find it easily, that's good.
So are you saying that you have to cite in your source?
So, here's my policy on sources. Use as many as you need to. You can get by, generally, with only using the textbook and what we talked about in class. And in those cases, even if you don't include citations, I'm not going to care. However, if you want to use outside sources, you are welcome to.
So like say if you did like the first prompt of the NCA and you want to go find out something about
Absolutely, yeah. If you want to bring in any outside information whatsoever, you are welcome.